against efforts to remove Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff from office, unquote. He added, to many Brazilians and observers, the controversial impeachment process more closely resembles a coup d'etat. So talk about the timing of Bernie Sanders' statement, the content of his statement, and then Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, have they weighed in, and also President Obama.
So it's been fascinating to watch because originally the perception of this process was shaped by Brazil's domestic media, which is an oligarchic media. They're owned by a tiny number of extremely rich families, all of whom are united against the Workers' Party and in favor of impeachment. Reporters Without Borders, the global media group, said that these media organizations were not acting as journalists. They were agitating against democracy in pursuit of the interest of their owners. And so the perception originally was that this was the people rising up against a corrupt government. But as more people started looking at what was happening in Brazil, as more international journalists who aren't beholden to these domestic interests started reporting on it, international opinion started radically changing. Just this weekend, Le Monde, the largest and most influential paper in France, one of the most influential in the world, denounced impeachment. They said if it's not a coup, it's a farce. You have international transparency groups, as you referenced earlier, denouncing it, the Organization of American States, members of the European Parliament, the British Parliament, and now Senator Sanders. So you see this growing awareness of what's actually taking place in Brazil, this attack on democracy. I do think it's a little disturbing because, unfortunately, throughout the campaign that he ran, foreign policy was a very, you could say ignored, but certainly deprioritized part of Bernie Sanders' challenge to Hillary Clinton, even though her foreign policy needed so many objections and questions and attacks. He seemed to have very little interest in it. Now that he's done, he's willing, I guess, to be a little bit freer about commenting on foreign policy, and so it's kind of a case of better late than never, but I wish that statement had been issued a lot earlier. The United States government has been remarkably silent about what's taking place in Brazil, for the obvious reason that they got caught in the 1960s having participated in and helping to plan the coup against the left-wing democratically elected government after vehemently denying for years that they were involved. Documents surfaced showing that they were critical participants in that coup and also supporting the military dictatorship that followed. And so Brazilians are very sensitive about whatever role the United States might be playing in their internal affairs. And so the president and the State Department have been very kind of muted about what it is they're willing to say. But the United States government for decades has always preferred right-wing governments to left-wing governments in Latin America. They've certainly proven that over and over. As I said earlier, the right-wing faction that is now taking power in Brasilia wants to become subservient again to the United States. And so I think it stands to reason that President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the rest of the State Department and Pentagon, to the extent they care, are pretty happy about the developments that have taken place here in Brazil in terms of a government that wasn't elected, but that is much more favorable to American interests.
Foreign Peace Report, I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, the Brazilian Senate has voted to impeach the country's democratically elected president.
And thanks again, Ben, for putting together that montage, and thank you to Democracy Now! For the content. I'm now delighted to introduce two speakers. If you want to come to the stage, Christine Blower and Georgia Plattman. Our first speaker is going to be Christine, who is the former General Secretary of the NUT and is currently President of the European Association of Teacher Unions. I suggest you perhaps you would. That's fine.
We're going to go here.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And Christine, I think you bring solidarity greetings from the trade union movement, and you're going to say a few words about why solidarity is so important on Brazil. Yeah. Can I let you know when you've got one minute?
You can indeed. I'll try and finish before then. Good evening, colleagues and friends and comrades. I'm speaking tonight as the President of the European Region of Education International, and also on behalf of the TUC. So I just want to start with some kind of education matters. I was very privileged to have been in New York back in October when we had a live link up with Brazil, with Lula and Jeffrey Robertson, and we were talking about how we must develop their campaign. It was because Education International was there celebrating 50 years of something that hasn't really happened, which is, free public education everywhere. But the Lula event was extremely good. And then last month, because we're now in February, our affiliate in Brazil, I'm going to try my Portuguese now, Confederação Nacional de Trabalhadores em Educação. Not too bad.
Very good. Very good.
They had their congress, and of course this was a very good opportunity for them to be able to say to us in the international trade union community of teachers just how appalling things are. And I'm pleased to tell you that part of what the congress did was to call for all-out strike as from March the 15th, because the notion of 20 years of a freeze in investment in education and health. I mean, it's unthinkable. You can look back the numbers and say, if this had happened 20 years ago, there would be 70% being less spent now and so on. You can work out the numbers. But the idea that a government, that isn't really a government at all, can come in and say that it's going to do this. So our colleagues and our friends in the trade union movement in Brazil are suffering the full force of neoliberal policies of privatisation and the replacement redistributive policies with privatisation. And the notion that they will do welfare reform, isn't it true that whenever something appalling is going to happen, it's called reform, that welfare reform will come in, and it's absolutely clear that it will target the working class. And ironically, after we just had the minute silence just at the beginning of the meeting for Lula's wife, it's absolutely clear that these things will also target women. In particular, the attacks on education will mean that women who had, of course, been on the move and on the rise, and we see that, of course, with Dilma's election, will find themselves in a very difficult position. So our comrades in that Brazilian teachers union are expecting and hoping for broad support from the international community as they move into strike action. And I come really from both the education unions, but also from the TUC with, I guess, three key messages. And they're messages that I'm sure everyone will repeat this evening. They are solidarity with our sisters and brothers in Brazil who are fighting for democracy, justice and human and civil rights. They are to support Lula. I mean, it's absolutely clear, I think, to all of us that he put social justice on the map in Brazil, and that would have been his legacy, except that now it's truncated and we see what's happening. And he clearly did stand and does continue to stand for social progress, and also, of course, to stand for a better Brazil for all, and to stand for and with Lula as he goes through his judicial processes, and also with Dilma Rousseff. I should say that the TUC has a very good record so far on what it's done about Brazil. The TUC has been involved with the organisation in Brazil, the Coup, and Francis O'Grady has particularly spoken out very forcefully about the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. And those of you who follow Huffington Post will, I'm sure, have seen her remarks on there. Sally Hunt, who speaks from the TUC on international matters, has been to the Brazilian embassy to make representations about what's going on, and of course the TUC has publicly backed the legal campaign to defend Lula, and spoke at the launch with Jeffrey Robertson, and supported the conference in Amsterdam. So there's a lot going on that the TUC is involved in, and I hope that those of you who are here from unions will also see messages coming down through your own unions. I mean, I don't need to tell you what's wrong with what's going on in Brazil. You've seen it here, and you'll hear it from everybody. The attack on social justice and the legacies of President Lula and Dilma Rousseff, who should still be in place. The attack on trade unions, the undemocratic way in which it's done, and the fact that these charges have been laid in a completely corrupt way by corrupt people. So I think it's our job in the trade union movement to spread the word and make it clear that there has been a coup. And the fact that we're saying no coup in Brazil means that we clearly think that there should not have been a coup, and we need to be working against it. We need to back the legal case, and we understand that there'll be a crowdfunding campaign to make sure that there is actually money available to do that, and we would want all the unions in the TUC to be backing that, and to show solidarity with Brazilian unions wherever and whenever we can. And obviously from the education point of view, that will be in a strike that's starting on March the 15th. Our comrades in that particular union in Brazil have even hoped that we might get some delegations that go to Brazil during the period of the action, so that we can demonstrate physically and in person on the ground support with what's happening to workers in Brazil. So I hope that maybe some people will feel able to do that, particularly if they've got policy on this in their unions. But I mean, the key message this evening surely is just solidarity.
Time as well. That's excellent. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Georgia Chapman, who is a former Telesur English journalist. And Georgia's going to be talking to us a bit about the role of the media and the role that the media has played in Brazil and Latin America. And following Georgia, we're going to see a film, an Al Jazeera film, that will complement that.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. So yes, I worked with Telesur English between 2014 when it was established and last year. I came back for other reasons, nothing to do with my job, which I loved. If for anyone who doesn't know, Telesur was absolutely revolutionary in Latin America. It was the first real major attempt at combating the media at the time, which was predominantly right-wing or neoliberal, certainly, and white, very, very white, and often filmed in Miami. Telesur kind of broke that boundary. It was established by Hugo Chavez with this kind of Bolivarian thought of, you know, let's unify this continent of people who speak similar languages and come from similar backgrounds. But let's show diversity, and it was the first network to ever have a news broadcast in Quechua, and you see every day, you see people of all colours, of all sexualities, and it really embraces and enjoys diversity, which is Latin America. When I got there in 2014, we were told very clearly, we are fighting a war. There is a mounting campaign by the right. They are so sick to death of all the progressive governments that have come to be over the last 2 decades, and they want us out. And like we saw, it's very orchestrated, it's very explicit, and it's not hidden at all. So most of the leftist governments tried to kind of tackle this by doing big media reforms. Telesur English was based in Ecuador, and there Correa undertook this like very aggressive media reform. He said, we're going to scrap the old system. We're going to give a third to the private sector, which at the moment has 100%, a third to the government, and a third to the communities, roughly. So communities as in like indigenous communities, youth groups, things like that. But to do that, we need we need 60% of the airwaves back, and we need 60% of the tele channels back. So obviously that caused a lot of stir there, but that happened in several other countries. But as we'll see in the next video, where it didn't happen was Brazil. Lula and then Dilma failed to tackle the biggest conglomerate in Brazil, which is Globo. And they carried out this 5-point plan, as we saw in the Democracy Now! Video, and did play a massive role in the coup. So one of the things I found out while working there, again, sorry if I'm talking to people who already know this sort of thing, but Globo is part of a massive network of right-wing media. It's called the Grupo Diario de America, or the American Newspapers Group. Go on their website, it's fascinating, gda.com, and they explicitly say we play a key role in informing and influencing public opinion in each of our respective markets. We're 11 countries, one source, one voice kind of thing. They also say Their readers are highly educated, with financial resources and high decision-making power, and they call themselves, or at least pronounce on their website, the most powerful communication resource of Latin America, and that's 11 countries, and Globo is part of that. So it's not hidden that there's this network of people who actually call each other every morning and say, right, what are we doing today? What's on the agenda for today? So, you know, anyone who would say to me at Telesur that you're propaganda, I'd say, sure, but the other side is worse. And the other thing to know about Brazil compared to other leftist countries is that Globo is state by state, has multi-channels and multi kind of state radios, and they're often owned by politicians themselves. So you get, in right-wing states, you get very, very little government criticism, state government criticism at all. So that's some interesting things I found out while I was there. And then I kind of just wanted to end on a kind of message of hope in a way, that I actually think the media is massively important, and this video is going to show it better than I could say it, but I really think that people aren't stupid, and the people I spoke to on a day-to-day basis knew how to navigate the very polarized media in their region. They were able to say, hey, this isn't the full story, but that's not the full story either. There's not much in the middle. There's not much other than these kind of polarized political views that you can get easily other than on the internet. But then again, in Latin America, still most of it is old media that people get their media from. But the point is, people aren't stupid there at all. They are finding things out, and we have to remember that all the progressive governments were elected against a backdrop of no media support. In fact, media attacks. So if they could do it once, they could do it again. So I leave a slight message of hope.
And if anyone's not following Telesur English on a regular basis, then I think you should do that. Ben, we're going to show our next film now. So this is a Al Jazeera film about a book that George was just talking about.
The Olympics come to end in Rio. It will be business as usual in Brazil, which means politics as usual as well, as the Senate holds its final vote on the impeachment of the country's suspended president, Dilma Rousseff. Rousseff is caught up in a huge oil corruption scandal known as Operation Car Wash. She herself is not under investigation, although many of the MPs trying to oust her are. Supporters of Rousseff's Workers' Party, the PT, are calling this a soft coup, and many say that part of the blame lies with the country's conservative news media. They're talking about a company called Rede Globo, the biggest media conglomerate in Latin America. Owned by the richest family in Brazil, the Marinhos, Globo TV gets ratings that other broadcasters would kill for. Every night, about 50 million Brazilians tune into Globo's flagship newscast, Jornal Nacional. And Globo didn't just cover the protests over Operation Car Wash. In some instances, it called on viewers to join them. Historically, Globo has not been shy with its opinions. Back in 1964, it supported a military coup, and the network has since apologized for the cozy relationship it had with the junta over the following 2 decades. 13 years ago, when the PT took power, it chose not to reform the media, and clearly thought that it could tame Globo in other ways. On that, the PT has been proven wrong. The Listening Post's Paulo Ganino now from Rio de Janeiro on the Brazilian media behemoth known as Rede Globo.
For Brazilians, 7 p.m. is TV time. This is Globo's magic programming slot. 3 straight hours of the country's top TV novelas.
Boa noite. CIA.
Should it be better to start just before and then let it continue?
This is Globo's magic
Put back.
hour. Elsewhere, TV news might be in crisis, but in Brazil, more than 70% of the population get the entirety of their news, all of it from television. And Globo is the largest network in the country.
Globo is the first, most powerful power in this country. It's more important than the parties, the church. The editor-in-chief of the evening news of Globo is the most powerful politician in this country.
The Jornal Nacional, it's so influential, it can just change the entire view of the country. Just one night only, you can change the entire course of the debate in the country.
É a fonte de informação das pessoas.
It's the go-to source of information, with news that shapes the way people think.
O Jornal Nacional está começando.
Creating a version of reality that people end up accepting as the truth. It's the production of a hegemony of thought, of an interpretation of the facts which presents itself as the truth.
Acaba aceitando que aquilo é verdade.
There's a saying in Brazilian politics which goes like this. If the Globo's evening news didn't show it, it didn't happen.
In the past 2 years, the corruption scandal known as Operation Car Wash has left Brazil in a political crisis. Millions of Brazilians took to the streets. Some in support of President Dilma Rousseff, who, although not directly under investigation, has been suspended, while others were demanding her impeachment. Globo seemed to take sides.
Globo was not just covering the protest.
Muitos estão chegando ainda.
He would go there, he would say, you can still come. Everybody's gathering around here now.
Muita gente chegando pelas estações de metrô.
A Rede Globo interrompeu a sua...
Globo interrupted its regular transmission to present the call as if you were going for a picnic, a day out.
Dá um tempinho na cobertura do esporte. Vamos falar das manifestações que acontecem pelo país.
Like, come down to protest against corruption, against the government. And it was an important factor for the middle classes, who are incensed at having lost their privileges, to mobilize in one of the biggest protests ever.
As manifestações.
This big channel has also the biggest newspaper, and has also lots of radios. Journalism should be against power, against status quo, against establishment. And Globo has always had this promiscuous relation with power since the beginning.
In 1964, Globo openly endorsed a military coup and went on to establish itself as the dominant media company in Brazil. 20 years later, 1 year before the military handed power back to civilians, 300,000 people gathered in São Paulo calling for the end of military rule.
Dia de festa em São Paulo, a cidade...
On Jornal Nacional, audiences were told that the protesters were celebrating the city's anniversary. In 1989, Brazil finally held its first direct presidential election in almost 30 years. Jornal Nacional backed the conservative candidate Fernando Collor, skewing the debate heavily in his favor.
Ao transmitir o encontro dos presidenciáveis, a televisão cumpriu mais uma vez o seu papel na democracia.
Then, 2013, protests erupted over the economy and corruption. Globo was one of the demonstrators' targets, and the network finally apologized for its support of the coup. An apology that felt tactical.
O reconhecimento de erros, como o apoio editorial ao golpe militar de 1964. E nesse momento de questionamento,
at this critical point, Globo was trying to appear more impartial, to say, we are not just defending the neoliberal order, the establishment, the elites. We want to be more inclusive, so we are revising our previous position. Well, that was kind of an empty gesture. PR, really.
Globo doesn't seem to like the scrutiny that comes with being Latin America's largest media conglomerate, and as a former Brazilian president put it, one of the country's power institutions. We contacted them repeatedly asking for an interview for this report, but no one was put forward. Some of the journalists we approached directly told us they'd be fired if they talked to us on the record.
Globo is a national network, but the They say politics is local, and across Brazil, Globo's affiliates will be influenced.
The regional news coverage in Brazil is a lot worse than national news coverage, which is already bad. The thing is, the affiliates from Globo were always owned by politicians.
1/3 of the Brazilian Congress holds shares in the TV stations or radio stations in their regions which transmit their propaganda. They are regional oligarchs who control information because they own the affiliates of Rede Globo, the local newspapers, the local radio stations. You will not hear a word of criticism against the local governors because the radio stations belong to them.
In Brazil, lots of things that are obvious in the world are not here, like separation between church and state. We didn't have that. We didn't have also separation between press and government.
In 2002, Lula da Silva, leader of the Workers' Party PT, won Brazil's presidential elections, marking a leftward turn in government. But, unlike other leftist leaders around Latin America, who focus on dismantling mega-conglomerates, including those in the media, neither Lula nor his successor Dilma Rousseff took on Globo and its dominance.
The biggest advertiser in Brazil is the government. When Lula got elected in 2002, he could put all the advertising money in a good national TV, public, just like France or England. He didn't. He thought Globo would work for PT, just as Globo worked for previous governments. But Globo didn't.
They were and are afraid of Globo. They didn't challenge Globo. And that is Lula and Dilma's biggest mistake. They saw it coming, but they couldn't react. They built their own demise.
Those leftist leaders may have felt that Globo was too big to reform, or that they could use the office of the president to bring the network under control. Now Brazil has an interim government, a conservative one. If the Senate votes to impeach Rousseff, that government might be in power until 2018. Its story will be told, probably without apology this time, on Jornal Nacional. And Brazilians, in their tens of millions, will be watching.
As the Olympics come to an end in Rio...
Thank you, Ben. That really shows why exposing media misrepresentations is so important in our solidarity work, and the work that Christine was saying earlier about the labour movement being involved, and we all need to be involved on social media as well in countering that. Our next speaker, I'm very pleased to welcome Orlando Hill. There is a large resistance movement against the illegitimate and unelected government in Brazil, and its plan to sell off national services and to impose cuts and to have austerity. And Orlando, I think you're going to talk about the importance of the resistance movement and what we can do to show solidarity.
Yeah, the way I see it, first of all, fora teme, which is how you should always start a speech. But what I would like to say is that what's happening in Brazil is no different from what's happening here, what's happening in it is an attempt of the elite of clawing back what they have lost. Here we can see it with the austerity measures, we can see it with the privatization, with handing the NHS over to private companies, getting schools and making them into academies, forcing schools into academies. And in Brazil it's no difference, except that in Brazil it seems to be in steroids, as was mentioned beforehand with the capping of public spending. The fight there, the struggle there is against austerity, is against neoliberalism, which is the same that we fight here also. So the solidarity that we can show is not a passive solidarity where we sit on the sidelines and as spectators, but it is crucial that our struggle here is linked up with the struggle that happens in Brazil, that happens all over the world, which is against neoliberalism, is against austerity measures. And I think this film that we're going to watch now, which is about the resistance of students, I think that's what it is, isn't it? It shows that we've got a lot to learn, and we've also got a lot to teach. And what we should be doing is linking up with the social movement. And I was very happy to hear that my union, the NUT, will be there in Brazil in solidarity with the Brazilian teachers as they strike. I am, as you know, a Brazilian activist, but I'm also a British activist, and I guess if I lived in America, I would be an American activist. I don't see this struggle as independent or nationalized. Is that all right? No, that's all right. I mean, everybody hear me? All right, I am a teacher, so. Okay, that's it. Yeah, I'm just happy.
So now we're going to see a short film by a good friend of ours, who is a Brazilian-based filmmaker, Daniel Hunt, which is going to give just a bit of a snapshot of the resistance taking place in Brazil, in particular the student movements.
On September 4th, 2016, the fourth consecutive protest since the coup on August 31st took place in São Paulo and Avenida Paulista. This protest was organized by two large coalitions of social movements, labor unions, and students' organizations. One is called the Coup.
Has that other microphone been left on?
And together they're made up of the largest and the third largest labor union federation in Brazil, the CUT and the CTB. The MST, which is popularly called the Landless Peasants Movement in English, sometimes it's called the Landless Workers Movement. The MTST, which is the Urban Homeless Workers Movement, was there in large force. There were student organizations like the National Students Union, and above and beyond the organized left that appeared in the protest, there were thousands and thousands of just average people from Sao Paulo, of all ages. There were elderly people who remember the days when they used to protest against the military dictatorship, which operated from 1964 to 1985. There were mothers with their children. There were a lot of young people out there. People who were just frustrated that their democratic right to vote was eliminated on August 31st, and that the minor offense, an infraction called fiscal peddling, which is not an impeachable offense according to the Brazilian constitution, was not only used to throw the democratically elected President Dilma Rousseff out of office, but 2 days later, they legalized it. This infuriated a lot of people, because if it was a serious enough crime to throw out a democratically elected president, why would they then just go ahead and legalize it 2 days later? Original estimates were that there were going to be about 25,000 people there, but half an hour into the protest it became clear that it was much larger than they anticipated. By 5 p.m. they estimated there were already 50,000 people on Avenida Paulista, and an hour later the crowd had swelled to 100,000. It occupied both sides of Avenida Paulista for about 6 blocks. It began to move and go into a series of tunnels onto Avenida Rebouças. off the lights so that it was harder to see, and possibly because it was harder to film because there were so many people filming what was going on. And the police presence began to grow. The protests continued along peacefully, a joyous mood in the air. People were chanting things like "Out with Tema," "Dilma fought for your rights during the dictatorship," and in a reference to these upper middle class protests against Dilma Rousseff last year, in which rich people were banging on pots and pans in their windows in wealthy neighborhoods like Jardins in Sao Paulo. They were yelling, "You can bang on your pots and pans, but your kitchen maid is going to clean them." As the protest arrived at Largo de Batata, some 2.5 hours after it started, the mood was exuberant. People were laughing and cheering and yelling. There were drum bands playing, and they had an assembly in which people voted on whether they wanted to continue with new protests. There are plans for protests on September 7th, which is a national holiday, and the crowd voted yes. They do want to continue the pressure until Temer is removed from office. So after the assembly ended, the crowd began to disperse, and once again, for the 4th consecutive time, towards the end of a protest, which is a legally recognized right for Brazilian citizens, the police arbitrarily decided to open fire on unarmed, non-violent protesters with tear gas grenades, with sound bombs, with water cannons, and it didn't just affect the protesters. In some instances, it's reported that they shot into bars where people who had nothing to do with the protest were just trying to enjoy their Sundays. We do not yet know what they're going to say their excuse was for this on the 4th of September, but it's a dangerous practice. It shows that a mechanized police force is under command from the state government of Sao Paulo to repress protesters and repress the right to public assembly.
So, thank you. That was a very hard-hitting film. Our next speaker is Giuliano Fiore, who is a British-Brazilian writer based in Rio and a contributing editor at Alvarado magazine. Do you want to come up? Thank you. So, thank you for joining us. I think you're going to talk a bit about the resistance that's been going on and your reflections on it.
Yeah, there's can you hear me well? Is that a button on the mic? Better now? Yeah. Okay. There's quite a lot to talk about, so hopefully I'll get through it in 10 minutes.
I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
Okay, better. Since this is a solidarity event, I suppose there's no need for me to give any pretense to neutrality, so primeiramente fora Temer. I also would like to offer my respects for Dona Marisa Leticia and my solidarity to her family. If Globo has ignored or at best criticized the Frente Brasil Popular and Povo Sem Medo movements that you saw there, triumphalist representations of a unified and widespread resistance to Temer's government unfortunately don't hit the mark either from my experience living in Brazil over the last year. There's some pockets of resistance and occupation, and life is beautiful in those pockets. But we haven't reached the numbers, unfortunately, that the Movimento Brasil Livre reached, the right-wing movements of Brazil in the run-up to and after the 2014 election. And the thing is, resistance is really needed right now. A couple of days before I came back to London, I was sat on the metro going home, and a guy walked on who could have been my brother, and he sat next to me, and I could see him thinking through something. And then all of a sudden he stood up, and shaking, he said to everybody, "Please, I've lost my job, I've lost my livelihood, I've lost my home, I'm on the streets, I have no money, I have no food, can somebody just buy me something to eat?" And he sat down and he burst out into tears. Now, that's an increasingly common scene over the last few months that I've noticed in the area that I live. And for me, Temer's program of government has contributed to the precarious condition of Brazilian workers and the Brazilian poor. I'll give a slightly different perspective to Orlando. For me, calling that program neoliberal is too simple. It's far more sinister, far more authoritarian than the comparatively soft, even numbing neoliberalism that we face here. Brazil is born of authoritarianism. The republic was founded in 1889 off the back of a military coup. There were coups in 1930, 1937, 1945, 1964. And this latest parliamentary coup is another democratic rupture, which, as Orlando said, is about the elite reclaiming power. But Brazil is now run by a kleptocracy, for whom neoliberal strategies, or the implementation of neoliberal strategies, is not just ideological, it's actually a means of forming alliances with institutions and sectors of society that will protect them from facing criminal accountability. Temer's initial cabinet was formed of the Secretary for Education, for Environment, for Transparency, for Planning, for Tourism, a Chief of Staff, and the Secretary of Government, who were all facing corruption allegations. Nobody had done more to combat corruption than Dilma Rousseff. She did a lot wrong, but in that respect, it was what she did right that led to her impeachment. Brazil is now a sort of Galliano-esque upside-down land, where a coup is presented as the exercise of legal authority, where corrupt politicians are seen as exhibiting exemplary behavior in its execution. It's a land where planes carrying challenges to the kleptocracy fall out the sky far too often for us to just discount them and not start to ask questions about possible conspiracy. Temer is the eminent figurehead of this Brazil. Indeed, he is its embodiment. Now, his program of government is clearly neoliberal in character as well, and I'll try and run through this part quite quickly because there's lots of data and stats which might be of interest, but there is quite a lot. His party's manifesto, which was launched in 2015, in fact, quite key that it was launched in October 2015 as it became clear that Dilma was likely to face impeachment charges, called Uma Ponte para o Futuro, a bridge to the future, clearly is in favor of fiscal tightening and a smaller government. His first act, or one of his first acts as president, was to set up the PPI, the Program for Partnerships and Investment, and put one of his buddies from the PMDB, his party, Moreira Franco, in charge of it, which is essentially the Ministry for Privatizations. They then set out 32 state entities, transport, infrastructure, utilities, etc., to be privatized. The Committee for Petrobras, the national oil company, has also had the BNDES, which is the National Development Bank, taken off the voting roster. It now can't vote on certain things, and other progressive entities also can't vote, which makes it much easier for private interests to have involvement in the national oil company. But most attention has been given to two proposals for constitutional amendment, or PEC, as they're called, PEC. The first is 287, which is to do with social security, and the second is 55, which is to do with limits on social expenditure. These together are a toxic combination for the poor, and they go right to the very heart of the progressive elements of what is not a perfect, but a pretty decent constitution for a country that's had its fair share of problems with democracy. The first one, 287, dealing with social security, it raises the minimum retirement age 65 from what was 55 and 60 for women and men. That will inevitably increase regional inequalities because in northern states like Maranhão and Piauí, people don't often live beyond 65. The minimum contribution has now been raised from 15 to 25 years, and even then you only get 76% of your pension. If you want 100%, you need to now be working or contributing for 49 years as opposed to 30, which means that if you want 100% of your pension, by the time you get to 65, you have to start contributing at 15. Now, people often talk about, by the way, the military aren't included in these reforms. People often talk about the contribution to the Bolsa Familia, the PT, particularly Lula's conditional cash transfer program, to reductions in extreme poverty and inequality. In fact, it was social security and a rise in the minimum wage that had to feel impact. So you can see that these changes in social security and pension reform are really going to impact on the poor most strongly, for whom, in fact, over the last 30 years, the contribution of social security to their overall income has risen from 7 to 29%. I'll go on to the other peg, which is called the peg da morte for lots of people, the peg of death, or the peg of the ceiling of expenditure. What it does, it limits primary expenditure for 20 years. It says that spending on health, education, benefits, social security, etc., will be attached to inflation rather than to tax receipts or to GDP. So it doesn't matter how much the economy grows, it's just going to go up with inflation. I'll come to inflation in a minute. What that means that if Brazil was to grow at 2.5% from 2018 to 2036, the spending would go down from 19% of GDP to 12%, a pretty significant reduction. Ben, I just want to show you this diagram very quickly, because if this constitutional amendment had been put in place in 2006, this is what spending on education would have been. This is what it actually was. And here for health. You can see the difference of 384.5 billion and 290.8 billion. The difference for assistance and social security is 484 billion. So you can see the kind of impact that this is likely to have. Investment on health in Brazil has always actually had a positive impact on GDP, so that argument goes out the window. And there's no escape clause in this constitutional amendment. So if there's a financial crisis, there's no way of the government intervening. For the next 10 years, no president can do anything to change this. After that, they can start trying to put through amendments to the amendment, but that will be a long process and they'd need a certain majority in Congress. Benefits, quickly. 4.2 million people have already had to reapply for their benefits, elderly, disabled people. The Bolsa Familia has already cut, this is since Temer came into government, has already cut 1.1 million families, that's 8% of the people who are receiving Bolsa Familia. He's changed the rules, people now have to have a certain identity, the CPF number, in order to qualify for the Bolsa Familia, which lots of people in poor families in rural areas don't always have. There's also now triangulation between 6 different databases to make sure that people are eligible, which is also a huge cost, huge bureaucracy at a great cost for the poor in particular. This isn't just an attack on the poor, this is an attack on the PT, the Workers' Party, because the Conservative government now knows that it's through the PT's social programs that they really manage to maintain popular support. Fiscal tightening has also been matched up with a quite traditional conventional monetarism, which is long-standing in Brazil. Brazil is a world champion in interest rates, and even though these have been brought down very slightly from 13.75% a year to 13% a year recently, Brazil is still among the countries with the highest basic interest rates, which has quite a devastating impact on industry. And then if there's death to the lambs, certainly the wolves are running free, and Brazil has one of the most regressive taxation systems. The poor pay proportionally more than the rich, and it's the only country along with Estonia that doesn't tax profits or dividends. This is out of step with even neoclassical economists. Even the IMF has criticized this. So Brazil is actually something quite different at this point in time. The impact is less economic activity, 8% drop in 2016. Consumer confidence is down, record unemployment, drop in tax receipts, and this is they're trying to dig their way out of a depression which isn't caused by debt, isn't caused by lack of liquidity in the public sector. It's caused by drops in commodity prices, drop in aggregate demand, drop in investment. Just very quickly, before I finish, I want to pose a challenge to people who are most likely on the left in this room, because this isn't a return to neoliberalism. Lula was the most democratic, the most progressive president Brazil has ever had. But he didn't break with the neoliberal model entirely. He had a neoliberal model with social safety nets.
It wasn't a well-structured social democracy that he managed to introduce. And there's arguments we can have about why that was the case. The person who's now finance minister was Lula's president of the central bank. He was the one who kept the interest rates high. Lula's first finance minister was the first PT mayor to introduce privatizations. Lula tried to bring consensus, tried to bring the elites along with him. And there's arguments to suggest that this actually has backfired now, with many of these elites realizing that they don't need Lula anymore, that consensus is no longer valid to them. Dilma herself in 2014, as she came to power, faced a lot of difficulties in Congress and actually started to implement the program of the opposition, an austerity program, which was then opposed by the opposition for political reasons, not for economic reasons. The reason why I say this is that the left in Brazil is unfortunately in disarray. Right this moment, there's a vote in Congress, in the lower house. This is the last thing, in the lower house, to elect the new president, and the PT is totally split. Some of the PT is voting with the PMDB, that's Temer's party. Some of them are voting for Dem. Rodrigo Maia, who's the current president of the chamber, who is supported by the PMDB. And very few of them are voting for the left-wing candidate, or one of the main left-wing candidates, Erundina, of the PSOL. This is just symbolic of the split that there is in the left at the moment, in parliament and on the streets, unfortunately. And if the left is really to mount a real opposition, it needs to work out what is the alternative that it's going to offer, and how is it going to offer that alternative. Maybe that's a conversation we can get into at some point. Thanks.
We've got two speakers left, but before that I'd like to introduce Donna Hume to say a few words about how you can support and get involved in No Coup in Brazil.
Thank you. I am going to do that, but before I do that, we're going to have a photo. I think you're all given the Flora Tamir signs on your way in. And I think Ben's going to come down to the front, and if you could all hold them up. And we have a photograph for all across social media. Makes such a difference, I think, to people, progressive people in Brazil, to see support like this from such a large group of people.
Francisco.
Can I borrow your sign?
Yes.
You don't want to do a video while we shout for the tema?
Sure.
Good idea.
1, 2, 3.
Fora Temer!
1, 2, 3.
Fora Temer!
1, 2, 3.
Fora Temer!
Fora Temer!
Thank you very much. So I think that there's a collection that is now going around, and it's just basically an appeal for any donations or support that you can give for the campaign. This is a campaign that's been pulled together by volunteers. It's run entirely from donations, obviously in response to the coup, and set up to raise awareness about what's really going on, from the throwing out of the first female elected president by 61 men to the imposition of the neoliberal policies that you've been hearing about. And it's done a fantastic amount of work over that period. It's organised more high-profile statements, bringing together trade union leaders, politicians, musicians, artists and others that have been published in The Guardian elsewhere. It's organised events. I think this is the third event like this, and has a continuous social media profile, which is so important to raise awareness and build support for what's going on, countering the all of the misrepresentation in the media that we've been hearing so much about this evening. So anything that you can give to enable that good work to continue until we get Tamir out would be fantastic. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. So our penultimate speaker is Chris Williamson, who's come forward. Chris is a former Labour MP, who many of you may know. He's certainly involved in Labour Friends of Latin America, and he's also written numerous articles about Brazil's crisis and the regressive politics going on there. Chris.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Liz, for the introduction. And I'm not doing any Tony Blair tribute out with my white shirt and tie. A bit hot in here. I was really struck by the horrendous description of what's happening by Giuliano's contribution just now, and it opened my eyes. I mean, things are more difficult than I actually fully appreciated. And what is particularly galling for me, and I'm sure all of us in this room, is what is almost a conspiracy of silence in the British media about this horrendous offence that is being perpetrated on the Brazilian people by the Temer regime, this 20-year spending freeze. And that's a graph that you put up there. I mean, that really brought it home to me, and that is something I think that, you know, that should be distributed right around the country. In a way, you know, it's potentially portents of things to come, isn't it, in this country in the post-Brexit era in which we are currently living, and to, you know, do what they've done into to actually incorporate that into the constitution, and to see a situation where 62 senators can overrule the democratic wishes of more than 50 million people actually offends against the democracy, decency and morality. And it really is important, therefore, it seems to me, for us all in this room and beyond, and indeed for that matter for the British media, to be shouting this from the rooftops. I'm really pleased, however, though, that the Labour leadership has articulated its support. I'd like to, and I think there is scope for there more to be done, but it was encouraging to hear the Shadow Foreign Secretary make her opposition to what's happening in Brazil very clear at the Labour Party conference last year. And I think she said something along the lines of, you know, effectively Rousseff was impeached for exaggerating the Workers' Party record, and you know, postulated what on earth would happen in this country if that were to apply here. My goodness me, every single administration since time immemorial, I think, would have been impeached on that basis. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn's support is well known, and even before the impeachment took place, Jeremy made his views very clear, and his solidarity is without question. And as well as spreading the message about this appalling offence against democracy, I think it's also important, notwithstanding the point that Giuliano made about the fact that, you know, more could have been done and there was almost accommodation of neoliberalism. There was nevertheless, however, significant progress made, and you know, Giuliano, I'm sure, would agree with that. You know, with 40 million people lifted out of poverty, 15 million jobs, the internationally recognised social programmes, which are all now under threat. And of course, we can get depressed by this situation, can't we, with the election of Donald Trump and, you know, the kind of neoliberalism, the neoliberal fight back. And I remember reading something. It was a quote from Chomsky, who was speaking at the Harvard University on the 13th of April 1996, and these are his exact words. He says, "There is a terrific economic miracle under the neo-Nazi generals that we installed with great self-adulation back in the 1960s. And by 1971, it had become the American darling of the business community. And the president and the general who ran the place pointed out that the economy is doing fine. It's just that the people aren't." And that is, you know, quite clearly the case now to an even greater extent, and it's going to get worse. And of course, you know, the same thing is happening to a large extent in this country as well. And that's why I think it's so important that we do remember the importance of international solidarity. And it can kind of sound quite empty, can't it? You know, this kind of notion of it's quite, you know, we say it, you know, but we really need to actually make it a reality. That international solidarity is so important, because what is happening in Brazil today could be happening here in the United Kingdom tomorrow.
Yeah.
And remain optimistic though. I mean, I'm a Labour Party member, and you know, I think to be on the left in the Labour Party, you know, you have to be a dreamer, don't you? You have to be optimistic that, you know, a better world is possible. And what I find encouraging is gatherings like this, is the fact that there are the numbers of people on the street in Brazil, there are the numbers of people in the United States rising up in opposition to Donald Trump, people rising up in this country and around the world indeed to what is happening in the United States. And of course the reason why people are doing that there is because they have had the oxygen of publicity. And I'm certain that if more people were aware of the absolute outrage which is going on in Brazil today, we would see more people rising to the challenge and expressing their solidarity. We're not going to get any favours, as we know, from the media, so it's going to be down to us to actually make that case and make that argument. And of course we do have the opportunity now, through things like social media, to get that message out there. So I suppose my message from today is to, yes, let's be angry about what's happening, but let's take strength from the solidarity with comrades in Brazil, with comrades in the US, with comrades across the world to work together. And if progressives around the world can come together, then we will prevail. There's never been, it seems to me, a more important time probably since the 1930s, and in many ways we failed in the 1930s, for there to be worldwide solidarity. And we all know what happened as a consequence of there not being that international solidarity with, for example, the Spanish people in the Spanish Civil War. To some extent, that was understandable because there wasn't necessarily the international awareness. We do now have alternative outlets to get the message out there, but it's going to be up to us to make sure that we do that. Let's show that international solidarity, let's work together, and let's not allow this outrage to stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I know Chris has got to dash off to get a train, but thank you for that, and thank you for all you do. Our final speaker needs no introduction to most people. Where is he? There. Francisco Dominguez is Head of Latin American Studies at Middlesex University and is co-author of Right-Wing Politics in the New Latin America. And Francisco, I think you're going to be reporting back on a European solidarity event with Brazil that you were at this weekend in Amsterdam. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Let me get Amsterdam out of the way first. This was a fantastic gathering of Brazilians living outside Brazil from several dozen countries that came together in Amsterdam to discuss what to do internationally, particularly in Europe. People came from Italy, Spain, Germany, and so on, France, to actually get together and see how can they do things in order to help to build solidarity and to create the solidarity movement that we need. There were interesting exchanges, and I found the contributions pretty useful. I was there on Friday, and certainly on Saturday. I couldn't stay for Sunday. My permission did not extend to Sunday, I'm afraid, so I had to come back here. And I found the contribution made by Emil Sader, a very well-known Brazilian intellectual, I think one of the best of the event, as far as I was concerned. Why do I say this? And I'll get into my subject today. I think it's because he was absolutely correct in establishing the political framework, not only to understand the dynamics of politics in Brazil right now, but also out of that, we should draw the specific lessons and tasks that we need to undertake in order to build that solidarity movement that is essential, and this is what exactly we're trying to do over here. Seems to me that the Amsterdam meeting had one shortcoming, which is something that is totally resolvable, which is they concentrated too much on Brazil. Which is not fault, they're all Brazilians after all. But it seems to me that the key is how do we actually organize in order to influence public opinion as a solidarity movement in the countries where we happen to be. That is what is going to have influence. As I said, the discussion is very good, and Emile Savera said the following. He basically said that there is the right wing and there is the Workers' Party. The right wing are disgusting. This seems to be a characteristic that they have everywhere. And the Workers' Party is the party of government, whatever difficulties, shortcomings they may have. In fact, I've been around for a long time, you can tell, and I do not know any perfect political party, not yet anyway. If there was to be such a party, I will join it immediately after this meeting. More precisely after the party. Now, no other government has done so much for the people of Brazil than the government of the Workers' Party in the total constitutional existence of that country. And this is the asset that we have to build upon. Brazilians will resolve their own internal matters. I don't have any intention or pretension to tell Brazilians what to do in terms of fighting their political battles. That will be decided by themselves. So therefore, the battle is between the right wing and the Workers' Party, and the right wing won this round. We won rounds from 2002 all the way to 2014 in various elections, implementing very interesting policies, very positive, very progressive, linking up with the rest of Latin America to change the world, which we were changing. And now the right wing actually won this round. But this is just a round. It's not the end of the story by any means. But this is the situation. The political dynamics is this. The government is desperately in a hurry to implement as much as possible, as quickly as possible, the full-blooded neoliberal program. This is absolutely essential from their point of view. And they know because it is a race against time. Movements take time, Giuliano. This is not me trying to be patronizing. It takes time to build up. But when they do, they happen sometimes overnight. Nobody imagined that on the 4th of February, 1992, a bunch of officers in Venezuela was going to change the history of the country and of the continent for so long, just with a phrase or with a television interview that lasted about 30 seconds. That's how much you have to expect. The Workers' Party changed Brazilian society because it introduced social inclusion. Millions and millions of individuals were made citizens, active citizens with full rights. If at the moment they're a bit confused, and it's totally understandable, but they are ready to fight. And therefore the government cannot allow this movement to emerge. It's doing everything possible to disarticulate them, to demoralize them, to disorganize them, and to repress them. So the more resistant, the more neoliberalism there are, the more resistant there is likely to be, the more repression there is likely to be. And therefore, this is the question. I'm going to need more than 1 minute, I'm afraid. Because I want to get to the case of Lula, which I think is central. So, they know that if they allow Lula, Ignacio Lula da Silva, the most popular politician in Brazil, to be the presidential candidate of the Workers' Party and of the people of Brazil in 2018, he stands a very good bloody chance to win.
For sure.
And therefore they're doing everything possible to imprison him on trumped-up charges. They have been investigating Lula for more than 4 years. The whole of the judiciary is after him. It's a nasty witch hunt. They are being accused, and the media, you saw the power of the media, Rede Globo, and all the rest of them, trying to make sure that they demonize him, witch hunt him, persecute him, and invent charges to him. So far, they haven't been able to find not even a sausage. And the reason is, such a sausage does not exist. He is totally innocent. So therefore, from our point of view, it is absolutely essential that in order to restore the dynamism of that society, our solidarity has to concentrate on democracy and the battles for democracy, and the fight for Lula to be the presidential candidate so that he's not in prison is absolutely the key to everything else, it seems to me. So we have to make sure that we do our absolute best to campaign on this. And there is already a team of lawyers who are campaigning on this, and I happen to be privileged to be chairing the platform with the great Jeffrey Robertson in Amsterdam, where he explained in details, in a wonderful, competent, legal, technical, but also popular jargon, exactly what the issues were involved. And they come to this. There is no way, Jose, that Lula can have a fair trial in Brazil. No possibility whatsoever. And the reason is not only the judge who is after him, a guy called Sergio Moro, can actually organize a fair trial because he's part of the political persecution, and therefore he cannot be impartial. And given that the judiciary, and particularly the judge that is in charge of it, we cannot be impartial, then Lula cannot have a fair trial. So it is vital that we denounce it. The more we denounce it, the more people bring into this issue, the more parliamentarians, intellectuals, trade unionists, and other celebrities and so on. And we tell the existing Brazilian government that this is completely unacceptable. The less likely it is that they're going to imprison him, the more the chances we have, and they have, to defend democracy. So this is the key. Find in the internet, this is what you do. Google the following, literally 2 seconds, check. Jeffrey Robertson, Lula, and find the video and circulate it to everybody that you can. We'll organize this better as a campaign, but this is absolutely central. So, viva Dilma, viva Lula, viva the Brazilian people, viva Brazilian democracy.
Bravo!
Don't we? Thank you very much for ending my minutes.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. I agreed to chair on the strict understanding I would bring the meeting to a close on time. And we have 2 minutes left. I've got a couple of thank yous and then I want to thank Unite for the room this evening, to VSC and Alvarado, I always pronounce that wrong, for supporting the meeting, to Matt Wilgris, I'm not sure if he's in the room, for actually organising the meeting, and to Patrick and Ben and Marsha and Donna who have volunteered this evening, so thank you to all of them. We do need to leave promptly, so I'd ask you to start putting coats on and things, but I want to say 4 things that you can do.
Was it advertised until 8:30?
Yeah, we were expecting discussion. Why is it ending now?
I'm sorry, I said at the start that we wouldn't have time for discussion. It's because this is the we've got before. So Unite have been really kind in giving us the venue.
We organised the questions and sent to the speaker.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Just the website was wrong.
Sorry, no, we are due to finish now. One of the things I wanted to invite you to, though, is another meeting where you can have more discussion. So No Coup in Brazil is going to be participating in a workshop at the day school Trump and Latin America, which is going to be hosted by the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign on March the 11th. And Julia Felmanas from the Workers' Party is going to be at that workshop and will be able to give an update on the situation there. So that's another event that you can come and participate in. That's a very good question. It's all in here. It's all in the pack. All in the pack. See, that's been very organised. 3 more things that you can do as you leave the. As you leave the room, please, if you haven't donated already, we very much welcome your donations, and you can also donate on the website. And do visit the website, which I think the details are in the pack, and sign the statement in solidarity with Lula if you haven't already. And then lastly, we've got a stall in the foyer outside, and there's the latest website, and you can buy a badge for I think £1, which all the money goes to helping support this work. So thank you everybody for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's yeah, started by the same time.
Olá.
Hello, nice to see you too.
Yeah, I mean, like, that in
Eu tava
There's a little square. No, you can write it. Right, you can write it. Or you need the road. You meet the first one, then right. And then you end up in a little square, and it's on the left of the square. You'll see. Gotta go.
It's a really good website.
I don't know if but I didn't like in most talks, like, yeah.